Elena Monroe did not raise her voice when she told her family she had matched into plastic surgery. She didn't need to. The silence that followed was loud enough to shake the polished mahogany table beneath their hands. Before I continue, I need to ask you a quick favor. We're working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers, and your support truly makes a difference. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment where you're watching from. That single click helps keep this channel alive and allows me to keep bringing stories like this. Dr. Jonathan Monroe, one of Boston's most respected cardiologists, stared at his daughter as if she had just announced she was abandoning medicine entirely. His wine glass hovered midair, perfectly steady, the same way his hands remained steady during 12-hour cardiac procedures. Across from him, Dr. Helen Monroe continued cutting her salmon with careful precision, eyes lowered, as if refusing to look directly at disappointment might make it less real. Plastic surgery, Jonathan repeated, finally setting the glass down. His tone was measured, professional, and devastating. After everything this family represents. Elena sat upright, shoulders squared, her heartbeat calm despite the familiar weight pressing against her chest. She had rehearsed this moment for months. Still, the public nature of the judgment burned. It's cosmetic, Helen said coolly, finally lifting her gaze. Hardly real medicine. Daniel Monroe, Elena's older brother, smirked without looking up from his phone. That's one way to waste a medical degree. Elena exhaled slowly. This wasn't shock. This was confirmation. She had grown up surrounded by people who believed saving lives only counted if blood spilled and hearts stopped beating. Everything else was vanity. What none of them saw, what they had never tried to understand, was that Elena had already chosen her path long before this dinner. Tonight was not about asking permission. It was about surviving the fallout. The Monroe name carried weight in Boston's medical world. Jonathan Monroe had performed thousands of cardiac surgeries and had a research wing named after him at Northbridge Medical Center. Helen Monroe lectured at Eastbrook School of Medicine and published papers quoted by neurologists across the country. Their dinner guests often included department chairs, hospital executives, and surgeons who spoke in outcomes and prestige. Daniel fit seamlessly into that world. He followed their father into cardiology, benefiting from introductions, mentorships, and quiet favors that smoothed every obstacle from his path. Elena, on the other hand, had always felt like an anomaly in her own home. While her parents revered control and hierarchy, Elena gravitated toward restoration. She spent her rotations lingering in trauma units, watching surgeons rebuild faces after accidents, restore hands after burns, return dignity to patients who had lost it overnight. Plastic surgery wasn't a detour for her. It was the intersection of medicine, precision, and humanity. You're choosing money over meaning, Jonathan said, slicing his steak. Elena met his eyes. I'm choosing impact. Daniel scoffed. You want to do nose jobs in Beverly Hills. Don't dress it up. The assumption landed hard, not because it hurt, but because it was lazy. They had already decided who she was without listening. Helen leaned back. Confidence is not medicine, Elena. Therapy exists for a reason. Elena folded her hands together. Steady. So does reconstruction. So does restoring function. So does helping someone recognize themselves again. The room didn't soften. It hardened. And in that moment, Elena understood something clearly. Her family would never validate a future they couldn't control. I start my plastic surgery residency in July, Elena said quietly. The words fell cleanly between plates and crystal. Jonathan froze. Helen's expression finally cracked. You applied without telling us? Helen asked. Elena nodded. I didn't need permission. Daniel laughed, sharp and dismissive. Good luck paying for that. The threat wasn't subtle. Financial support had always come with conditions, and Elena had known the price of defiance long before tonight. Jonathan set his fork down. We funded your education because we believed you would carry this family's legacy forward. If you insist on this path, you'll do it without our help. Elena felt something shift, not anger, not fear, but clarity. I understand, she said. That surprised them. Helen reached for a softer tone. We're trying to protect you from wasting your potential. Elena stood. I'm done living according to yours. She left the house that night without slamming the door, without tears, without promises to reconsider. 2 weeks later, the financial cutoff was complete. Rent assistance vanished. Insurance disappeared. The family credit card was cancelled without explanation. Daniel, meanwhile, received money for a new car. Elena moved into a studio apartment with unreliable heat and neighbors who argued through thin walls. She took extra hospital shifts, worked weekends at a private cosmetic clinic, and learned quickly that exhaustion was not a temporary phase, it was the cost of independence. Coffee became routine. Sleep became optional. But every bill she paid herself reinforced a truth no one could take away: she was building something that belonged entirely to her. Residency at Northbridge Medical Center demanded everything Elena had. Days began before sunrise and ended when the last procedure finished. Her weekends disappeared into 12-hour shifts at Harborview Surgical Institute, assisting senior surgeons and learning the realities of private practice. The contrast was sharp. Daniel complained about long hours while still relying on family money. Elena worked through migraines and muscle fatigue, calculating grocery budgets in her head during elevator rides. Dr. Michael Grant noticed the dark circles under her eyes. "You're burning yourself thin," he said after rounds. Elena smiled. Temporarily. The studio apartment was small but honest. Every inch had been earned. When she collapsed onto the bed at night, she slept deeply, not comfortably. The clinic work surprised her. Patients responded to her. They asked for her specifically. Not because she was the most experienced, but because she listened. She explained. She didn't judge. Dr. Anthony Morales noticed. "You don't rush people," he said after consultation. "That matters." Elena carried those words with her. By the 6th month, she wasn't just learning surgery. She was learning business, negotiation, and resilience. While her family waited for her to fail quietly, Elena was becoming someone sharper, steadier, and unrecognizable to the girl who had once needed approval to breathe. The decision to open her own practice came quietly, in a hospital parking garage after a reconstruction surgery that restored a teenager's face after a violent accident. Elena sat in her car long after midnight, hands resting on the steering wheel, heart still racing, not from fear, but certainty. She would not wait for permission. She would not ask for connections. She would build something that spoke for itself. The research was brutal. Boston medical real estate was unforgiving. Equipment loans came with punishing terms. Malpractice insurance demanded precision and patience. Elena found a small, outdated dental office in an up-and-coming neighborhood, cheap, neglected, but structurally sound. Jack Sullivan, the contractor, called it fixable. Elena called it possible. She spent Sundays measuring rooms, evenings studying zoning laws, nights watching practice management videos until her eyes burned. The loan approval took months and came with an interest rate that made her stomach twist, but it was enough. When she told her family, they reacted exactly as expected. "This is reckless," Jonathan said. "You don't have the experience." Daniel laughed. "You're Googling business advice." Elena didn't argue. She signed the lease anyway. By the time her residency neared its end, the clinic walls were torn open, her savings were stretched thin, and her future was frighteningly real. But for the first time in her life, Elena Monroe wasn't waiting to be accepted. She was already moving forward. Construction began the same week Elena completed her final month of residency. The timing was brutal but unavoidable. Permits, inspections, and supply delays didn't care that she was still working 60-hour weeks at Northbridge Medical Center. Jack Sullivan texted updates during surgeries, and Elena reviewed floor plans between cases, her phone tucked discreetly into her pocket. When the electrical inspector failed the first review, she stood in a hospital stairwell recalculating numbers with the calm focus she usually reserved for surgical planning. There was no panic, only adjustment. The clinic became her second residency, one she paid for in cash, patience, and sleep. Her family watched from a distance, offering unsolicited warnings instead of help. "These overruns happen to people who don't understand business," Jonathan remarked during one rare dinner. Elena nodded and paid for the HVAC upgrade anyway. The money hurt, but shortcuts would cost her more later. Every decision was deliberate. Every compromise was strategic. By the time the walls were repainted and the lights installed, the space no longer smelled like old dentistry. It smelled like antiseptic and possibility. Elena sent her family handwritten invitations to the clinic's opening without expectations. The envelopes were formal, restrained, and intentionally neutral. She refused to beg. On opening day, the clinic filled slowly with people who had watched her struggle in real time: nurses, former attendings, vendors, Jack and his wife, and Dr. Morales, who arrived early and stayed late. Jonathan, Helen, and Daniel never came. Elena didn't check her phone during the ceremony. She spoke clearly, thanked the people who had shown up, and skipped the line she had once planned to dedicate to family support. The absence hurt, but it didn't derail her. That evening, she discovered the family group chat messages she hadn't seen. Dismissive jokes, predictions of failure, and relief that the Monroe name wasn't publicly attached. Elena exited the group without responding. She didn't cry. She cleaned the clinic, locked the door, and went home to eat dinner alone. For the first time, the loneliness felt honest instead of imposed. The practice opened quietly the next morning. Elena's first official patient was a woman seeking a breast reduction that would ease chronic pain. The consultation was thorough, unhurried, and precise. Word spread quickly. Patients returned. Referrals followed. 6 months later, Elena was operating at full capacity. Revenue stabilized. Debt remained heavy but manageable. Emily Parker joined as office manager and brought order to scheduling, billing, and patient communication. Elena refused aggressive marketing. She built trust instead. Dr. Michael Grant referred a complex reconstruction case. Then another. When Dr. Anthony Morales began sending overflow patients, Elena understood she was no longer invisible. Her family noticed too. Phone calls resumed. Dinners were suggested. Praise came cautiously, framed as curiosity rather than acknowledgement. Elena remained polite and distant. She had learned not to confuse interest with support. A year into practice, Elena's name began circulating beyond Boston. Victoria Hale, an entertainment lawyer, booked a consultation and arrived with measured confidence. "Discretion matters," she said. "Your reputation suggests you understand that." Elena did. The referrals that followed were subtle but significant. One actress. Then a model. Then correction cases other surgeons declined. Elena's results were not dramatic. They were precise. Natural. Undetectable. That distinction mattered. When Isabella Cross flew in for a corrective procedure after another surgeon's failure, Elena spent 8 hours restoring balance no one else had seen. The outcome shifted everything. The clinic's waiting list tripled. Elena expanded carefully, refusing speed over quality. Medical journals requested case studies. Conference invitations followed. The Monroe family heard through others before Elena told them herself. 2 years after opening, Elena reviewed financial statements that still felt unreal. The practice was thriving. Loans were shrinking. Patient satisfaction was exceptional. The work was demanding, but it was hers. That same week, her parents invited her to dinner with unusual warmth. They praised her success openly, asked questions, and listened in a way they never had before. For a moment, reconciliation felt possible. Then Jonathan leaned back and smiled. "We've been thinking," he said. "Daniel is interested in plastic surgery. Perhaps it's time for the family to work together." Elena understood instantly. This wasn't pride. It was opportunity. She set her fork down slowly, eyes steady. "No," she said. The word was calm, final, and earned. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was clean. Jonathan Monroe did not hide his frustration when Elena refused the partnership. "You're letting pride get in the way of progress," he said, his voice edged with irritation rather than concern. Helen tried a softer approach, framing their proposal as protection, stability, legacy. Daniel remained quiet, his confidence noticeably thinner than it used to be. Elena listened without interrupting, then stood and excused herself before the conversation could turn into pressure disguised as love. She left the house feeling lighter than expected. The refusal wasn't rebellion anymore. It was maintenance. She had built boundaries the same way she built her practice, carefully and with intention. The following weeks proved she had made the right choice. Patient volume increased steadily, not explosively, but sustainably. Elena hired a second nurse, upgraded equipment, and reinvested every surplus dollar back into care quality. Her reputation grew not because she chased visibility, but because results traveled faster than advertising. In private moments, Elena acknowledged the quiet cost of her decision. Family celebrations happened without her. Achievements were shared selectively. But the absence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like alignment. 3 months later, Elena attended a medical conference in Chicago as a featured speaker on reconstructive outcomes. She stood at the podium facing surgeons who had trained her mentors, her data projected clearly behind her. The questions were rigorous. The respect was real. After the panel, several senior surgeons approached her about collaboration opportunities. One mentioned that a new plastic surgery clinic downtown, Daniel's, had been asking about referral networks. Elena said nothing. She didn't need to. Within the year, she began seeing patients seeking corrective work after procedures that promised too much and delivered too little. She never spoke her family's name. Ethics mattered more than vindication. Still, the pattern was unmistakable. Poor candidate selection. Rushed consultations. Inexperience masked by luxury presentation. Elena corrected what she could and referred out what she couldn't. The irony never crossed her lips, but it stayed with her. The call from Daniel came late on a Tuesday evening. His voice was unfamiliar, tight, cautious, stripped of arrogance. "We're closing the downtown location," he said. "Moving to something smaller." Elena listened without reaction. He asked, carefully, whether she might consider sending overflow cases or advising on complex procedures. The request wasn't framed as entitlement this time. It was need. Elena paused, choosing honesty over comfort. "I can't," she said. "That wouldn't be appropriate." Silence followed. Then Daniel asked if there was any way for the family to start over. Elena leaned back in her chair and looked around her office, the staff schedules, the patient files, the calendar booked months out. "Family support isn't something you ask for after success," she said evenly. "It's something you offer before." The line ended without resolution. Elena returned to reviewing charts, her focus steady, her conscience clear. The Monroe family practice closed quietly within the year. No announcements. No celebrations. Elena heard through colleagues, not through family. She felt no satisfaction in it, only confirmation. Excellence could not be inherited. It had to be earned repeatedly. Her own practice expanded into the adjacent suite, adding consultation rooms and a dedicated recovery area. Emily Parker handled growth with precision. Elena remained present in every major decision, refusing to become distant from the work that defined her. Patients trusted her not because of her name, but because she never treated their bodies like trends. Each successful outcome reinforced the same truth. Medicine, when practiced with humility and skill, didn't need validation from legacy or bloodline. On a quiet evening after her last surgery of the week, Elena stood alone in her office, city lights glowing beyond the window. She thought briefly of the dinner table where this journey had begun, of the silence that followed her announcement years ago. That silence no longer haunted her. It had shaped her. She didn't regret the distance, the exhaustion, or the moments of doubt. They had refined her judgment the way pressure refines precision. Elena turned off the lights, locked the door, and walked out knowing exactly who she was and what she had built. The Monroe name no longer defined her success. Her work did. Success changed Elena's life in practical ways before it changed it emotionally. The financial strain that once dictated every decision eased. Student loans were paid down steadily, then erased entirely. She moved from her studio apartment into a quiet place overlooking the harbor, not as a reward, but as a necessity for rest she had long postponed. The practice now supported a full surgical team, and Elena insisted on maintaining reasonable schedules despite demand. Burnout, she knew, destroyed good surgeons faster than failure. Invitations to speak multiplied. Medical journals requested long-term outcome data. Elena accepted selectively, guarding her time with the same discipline she applied in surgery. She no longer needed to prove plastic surgery was real medicine. Her results had settled that debate without her saying a word. The phone call from Dr. Laura Morrison of the American Board of Plastic Surgery arrived without ceremony. She invited Elena to present her reconstruction methodology at a national conference. The invitation marked a quiet turning point. Elena remembered studying Morrison's work during residency, never imagining her own name would one day appear on the same programs. She prepared meticulously, aware that recognition carried responsibility. The presentation was rigorous and well received. Questions focused on decision-making, ethics, and patient selection, areas Elena had learned through lived consequence rather than inherited privilege. Afterward, a senior surgeon told her, "You've changed how some of us think about outcomes." Elena smiled, knowing change rarely arrived through confrontation. It arrived through consistency. Reconciliation came, but not in the way her parents had imagined. Jonathan and Helen reached out sporadically, no longer dismissive, but careful. They asked about her work with genuine curiosity, not control. Elena responded kindly, without reopening doors she had intentionally closed. Boundaries remained intact. Daniel stayed distant, rebuilding quietly in a different specialty. Elena wished him well and meant it. She had learned that forgiveness did not require access. It required clarity. Family, for her, had expanded beyond blood. It included colleagues who challenged her, staff who trusted her, and patients who returned not for reassurance, but for results. One afternoon, Elena treated a young woman who reminded her of herself years earlier. Brilliant, uncertain, bracing for disapproval from a family that equated worth with prestige. After the consultation, the woman hesitated at the door. "How did you know you were making the right choice?" she asked. Elena considered the question carefully. "I didn't," she said. "I knew I could live with the consequences." The answer felt complete. Later, Elena watched the sun sink over the harbor from her office window, the same calm settling over her that once felt impossible. The practice functioned smoothly without her constant oversight, a sign she had built something resilient, not dependent. The story of Elena Monroe circulated quietly in medical circles, not as rebellion, but as evidence. Evidence that excellence could be self-built. Evidence that legitimacy did not require permission. Her name appeared on conference agendas, not gossip columns. Her work spoke in healed faces, restored confidence, and lives returned to normal. When asked about family influence in interviews, Elena kept her answers measured and brief. "I learned discipline early," she said. "I learned independence later." That balance defined her now. She closed her office for the evening, secure in the knowledge that she no longer needed to be understood by everyone to be successful. The final test of Elena Monroe's success did not come from critics or competition, but from choice. When a large medical group approached her with an acquisition offer, promising expansion, branding power, and a reduced workload, she considered it carefully. The numbers were impressive. The prestige was undeniable. But the contract required surrendering clinical control and accelerating patient volume beyond her standards. Elena declined. She had not endured years of exhaustion, isolation, and resistance to become efficient at something she no longer believed in. Her practice existed to serve patients, not shareholders. The decision surprised many and confirmed what those closest to her already knew. Elena valued autonomy over applause. She would grow on her own terms or not at all. That clarity, once so fragile, was now unshakable. Years after the dinner that started everything, Elena returned briefly to her childhood neighborhood for a medical fundraiser. The house looked the same. The world inside it had not. Jonathan and Helen greeted her with respect, not authority. Their pride, quieter now, carried no expectations. Conversation flowed easily, without judgment or persuasion. Daniel was not there. Elena did not ask why. Some distances no longer needed explanation. As she left, her mother touched her arm gently. "You built something remarkable," Helen said. It was not an apology. It did not need to be. Elena smiled, thanked her, and drove away without looking back. Closure, she had learned, was not about rewriting the past. It was about no longer living inside it. Elena Monroe ended the night the way she ended most nights, reviewing patient notes, confirming surgical plans, and turning off the lights herself. Outside, the city moved steadily, unaware of the quiet victories that shaped it. She stood for a moment in the empty clinic, listening to the hum of systems she had designed, funded, and earned. The journey had not made her harder. It had made her precise. She had chosen a path others doubted, paid every cost herself, and built something that needed no defense. Her family name no longer defined her worth. Her work did. And that was enough. Sometimes the people who doubt you the most are the ones who teach you how strong you really are. Elena didn't win by proving anyone wrong. She won by building something so solid that their opinions no longer mattered. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose between family approval and staying true to yourself, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more interesting stories, kindly subscribe and stay with us.